Marcus, and we'll see you then. What if companies with more money helped control what you wanted to see on the internet? The president says it could happen if the internet is not regulated.
And today, the FCC is set to vote on a set of new rules to do just that. News 13's Catherine Mazzone is in the Newsplex with what you need to know this morning. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Crystal. Now, those in favor of the regulations say it will make sure money doesn't control information and speed on the internet.
Network neutrality is the idea that all packets should still be treated the same, and the internet service providers shouldn't be making those choices based on who the packet's to and who the packet's from.
Ed Crandall is an associate professor of computer science at UNM. He says if the FCC passes the set of proposed new rules, the internet would have common carrier laws just like telephone service. Internet providers would be private companies that must sell their service to anyone without discrimination, all regulated by the FCC. Supporters say it's a win for you, the internet user. The rules would keep broadband providers from slowing down service intentionally, keeping data and video from you when some sites can't afford to pay for a preferential service. Crandall says big companies like Netflix and Google may be able to pony up the extra cash to keep you as a customer, but small businesses and amateur filmmakers may not.
The little guy that just wants to have a documentary that they've made and put it on their own website, they won't be able to do that with as good of quality of service as they otherwise would have.
Not everyone agrees, saying regulation is bad news. Hear from them in our next half hour, but keep in mind, whether the FCC passes the new rules or not, broadband providers won't necessarily be charging you more right now. You already pay for the speed you want. Back to you.
Thanks for that information, Catherine. Now, last year, a federal judge struck down the first attempt to regulate the internet, saying the FCC overstepped its authority when it did not classify service providers first. The new rules would address that.
Time is 5:03. Hundreds of New Mexicans who work for the Department of Homeland Security could be working without pay soon if Congress can't agree on funding. Republican members of Congress are trying to link Homeland Security funding to stopping the president's executive order granting legal status to 5 million undocumented immigrants. The Senate moved a new bill forward yesterday. This new version removes a provision that would have blocked executive actions on immigration. Congress has until Friday to agree on a budget or the money runs out.
Now, one area that would be hit hard if Congress can't come to an agreement, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Artesia. According to the Santa Fe New Mexican, it would be shut down. Many small cities and towns would also be stuck waiting on reimbursement checks following natural disasters. Also, about 350 students training there would close, and about 450 officers and agents would go without paychecks. Federal payments to contractors could also be delayed because of that. The man who led police in a wild chase down I-40 in a stolen school bus is suing the officers who shot him.
Nathaniel Shipman stole that empty bus from an Albuquerque yard in 2012, then headed down the highway to Grants. In a federal lawsuit filed today, Shipman claims that a Grants police officer shot him there, even though he wasn't a threat. Shipman took off, headed back to Albuquerque, where the cops eventually got him to stop by ramming the bus and spiking his tires. That's when a Bernalillo County Sheriff's deputy shot him. In the lawsuit, Shipman questions why the deputy fired because he claims he never had a weapon and the bus was disabled. We reached out to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office and also Grants Police, but BCSO wouldn't comment, and Grants PD never got back with us. Last year, Shipman took a plea deal on aggravated assault charges and is now serving probation.
An attorney says a controversial Albuquerque police officer was fired for not turning his lapel camera on.
Yeah, but this time it's the city that wants the cameras off. Jeremy Deere is accused of not recording the deadly shooting of Mary Hawks. Deere says his camera malfunctioned. He was later fired for insubordination and lying, but Deere claims APD made him a scapegoat, claiming he showed a pattern of not turning on his lapel. At a court hearing to fight to get his job back yesterday, the city wanted our cameras off.
If witnesses are videotaped, there's a possibility that their testimony might be influenced one way or the other.
If you're being upfront and you're being truthful and transparent, you shouldn't be afraid of any sunlight or camera recording about what's going on.
Deere and his attorney were okay with the cameras. The meeting was postponed, though, until the city attorney decides if public access to their cameras will be allowed. Parents, listen to this. Health officials say they're seeing the most cases of a dangerous virus, RSV, than they have in the past decade.
Yeah, the RSV virus that can be especially dangerous for infants and small children. That's what we're talking about here. Doctors at UNM Children's Hospital say they have been dealing with so many RSV patients that some days they don't have enough beds for them. Some think it's just a cold, but if you have an infant and you notice any sign of sickness, take them to get checked out. RSV is very contagious. Parents can be carriers. One vote could make history today. The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote in a few hours on President Obama's pick for Attorney General.
If approved, Loretta Lynch will then face confirmation before the full Senate. Lynch would become the first African-American woman to hold the nation's top law enforcement post. She would also be the second woman to serve as Attorney General and the second African-American to hold the post. Lynch is a two-time U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York. She's nominated to take over for outgoing Attorney General Eric Holder.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is at it again, telling the Washington Post he's more serious than ever about a run for the president's seat for 2016. The 68-year-old real estate mogul says he's hired staffers in key primary states and retained an election attorney. He also delayed signing on for another season of his reality TV show, The Celebrity Apprentice, because of his political projects. We'll see how that shapes out. The outrage and protest over state-required tests continue. Now APS is giving its response. Say no to park! Say no to park! Students in Santa Fe walked out on the new park test this week, and APS students are planning mass walkouts next week. It's the first year New Mexico is using the federal computerized park test, and state plans to use that test data to grade teachers and schools. Now, yesterday, APS released a memo saying testing will begin as planned on Monday. Students who choose to participate in the protest during classes will get an unexcused absence, which will result in a 0. They go on to say APS has not turned a deaf ear to the many opinions about park testing, but the fact remains that the tests are mandatory, end quote. Now, there's still confusion over what happens if kids don't take that test. According to federal and state law, the test is mandatory. If you want to read the full memo, you can check it out on our website, KRQE.com, then click on links.
Time is 6:33. For the first time this year, students will be allowed to show individual and ethnic pride at APS graduation ceremonies. District officials say stoles given by 4 groups, Black Student Unions, the Indian Education Department, the Mecca and Gay Straight Alliance, will be allowed this year. They're also encouraging cultural dress, saying graduation should be about more than academic achievement. Some students say they agree.
People will know where I come from and that I am Native American. I'm proud to be a Native American.
APS found out several schools were not letting cultural groups wear honor cords and stoles, so they made a district-wide policy that applies to groups that most schools do have. Health officials say they're seeing the most cases of the dangerous RSV virus than they have in the past decade. The RSV virus that can be especially dangerous for infants and small children is what we're talking about. Doctors at UNM Children's Hospital say they've been dealing with so many RSV patients that some days they don't have enough beds for them. Some think it's just a cold, but if you have an infant and you notice any sign of sickness, you're urged to take them to get checked out. RSV is contagious and parents can be carriers.
Our crews were on scene at APD's headquarters downtown as it was quickly evacuated yesterday. So what happened? Well, there were reports of the smell of natural gas in the building at 4th and Roma. That's according to the Albuquerque Journal. The report says AFD, hazmat, and technicians determined the leak was coming from the 5th floor. The leak seeped into the air ducts system, which quickly alerted workers. NM Gas fixed the problem. Employees were able to return shortly to work.
New this morning, Santa Fe City councilors have given the okay to an out-of-state advertising firm to help promote their city, but with a stipulation. They must hire local business. The city unanimously voted last night to allow the agreement with the city and the Boston-based advertising company called Fuse Ideas. Under that agreement, the company must funnel as much work as possible to local businesses. Just last week, the council voted to award the $900,000 job, beating out 3 New Mexico companies who applied. What if companies with more money helped to control what you wanted to see on the internet? The president says it could happen if the internet is not regulated.
Today, the FCC is set to vote on a set of new rules to do just that. Now, last half hour, we told you about those against this move. News 13's Catherine Mazzone is in the Newsplex with the other side of the debate. Good morning, Catherine.
Good morning, Crystal. Now, those in favor of the regulation say it will make sure that money doesn't control the information and speed of what you see on the internet.
Network neutrality is the idea that all packets should still be treated the same, and the internet service providers shouldn't be making those choices based on who the packet's to and who the packet's from.
Jed Crandall is an associate professor of computer science at UNM. He says if the FCC passes the set of proposed new rules, the internet would have common carrier laws just like telephone service. Internet providers would be private companies that must sell their service to anyone without discrimination, all regulated by the FCC. Supporters say it's a win for you, the internet user. The rules would keep broadband providers from slowing down service intentionally, keeping data and video from you when some sites can't afford to pay for preferential treatment. Crandall says big companies like Netflix and Google may be able to pony up the extra cash to keep you as a customer, but small businesses and amateur filmmakers may not.
The little guy that just wants to have a documentary that they've made and put it on their own website, they won't be able to do that with as good of quality of service as they otherwise would have.
Now, not everyone agrees, saying regulation is bad news. Hear from them in our next, rather keep in mind, whether the FCC passes the new rules or not, broadband providers won't necessarily be charging you more money, right now at least. You already pay for the speeds you want. Back to you, Crystal.
All right, thanks for the information, Catherine. Now, last year, a federal judge struck down the first attempt to regulate the internet, saying the FCC overstepped its authority when it did not classify service providers first. The new rules would address that. New developments this morning, about a deadly superbug easily spread by a medical scope.
Critics are now claiming the FDA has known about the bacteria for 3 decades, but only issued warnings last week after people died at UCLA. The instruments, called duodenoscopes, are used to inspect the intestinal tract, but they are notoriously difficult to clean, and critics add they have fundamental design flaws. A California congressman is calling for a hearing and an investigation into what the FDA knew about the bacteria and when they knew it.
A Texas mom is facing charges this morning after bringing a gun into a fight between 2 teen girls. Police say she's one of the girls' mothers. In a letter sent home to parents, the school says Viridiana Alvarez was holding it while trying to break up the fight. Still, she's being charged with aggravated assault. Parents say she could have handled things differently.
If you have a problem with the other little girl, you should have went to the little girl's mother and told the mother, look, this is going on, this needs to happen, put your foot down, be an adult.
Now, students say it was police, not Alvarez, who broke up that fight. New this morning, state police in Maine are now doubling the amount of vehicles involved in a messy pileup.
Troopers say there may be now more than 40 vehicles involved. No fatalities are reported, but there were several serious injuries. The traffic pileup consisted of cars, school buses, large semis. That area has been pounded with heavy snow, and drivers in the area are being asked to take an alternate route while crews finish cleaning up.